lawlessness, otherwise known as anarchy. This is the state in which your average survivor lived within the wasteland following the complete and utter collapse of society. By now, most of you probably know the drill. On August 27th, 2010, the dead began walking the streets, leading to chaos across the world as nobody was prepared for this level of catastrophe. However, by August 28th, martial law had been declared in America as the military were deployed across the country in order to set up designated safe zones as a way to fight back against the dead. During this 2-week period, civilians who found themselves within one of these safe zones would be subjected to strict rules and were constantly in fear of being deemed a security risk and separated from their families to other facilities. In other words, they had essentially given up their rights in exchange for protection at this time. It wasn't an ideal way to live, but it beat the alternative of being outside the fences as soldiers were ordered to execute anything dead or alive they came across in a naive attempt to prevent the spread of infection. Although, unfortunately, by September 9th, the military had failed their mission as the sheer numbers of walkers were too overwhelming to overcome, leading to what was left of the federal government ordering the abandonment of the safe zones and recalling of the soldiers back to the bases as come the following morning, Operation Cobalt was enacted, which saw the US Air Force bomb every major metropolitan city in a last resort effort to contain the outbreak, killing the living and dead alike as Marines remained on the outskirts of some cities awaiting commands to liquidate anything that survived the flames. These were the last orders given by the federal government before radio silence, as any remaining service member had either abandoned their post in pursuit of their families or retreated back to the various military bases across the country where they, from everything we've been shown, more than likely all lost their lives for one reason or another in time. But once the flames settled, as far as your average survivor could tell, everything was gone, and nobody was left around to enforce the rule of law, leaving America to be a land of anarchy, as any lone survivor remaining would be left to the mercy of plunderers looking to take advantage of this lawless way of life. It was hunt or be hunted for most, but through the ashes, smaller collections of survivors had begun banding together and forming communities through mutual benefit. Take Woodbury or the prison, for example. It wasn't like any laws were written down, but most within these communities understood the basics of living in a society. Don't steal anything, don't kill anyone, etc. If you do, you may be imprisoned or banished as not to pose any further risk to the collective. However, due to corruption in leadership or external conflicts, so few of these communities would survive past the first couple years into the outbreak. Some smaller factions, such as the cops within Grady Memorial Hospital, would attempt to maintain the laws of the old world by continuing their work post-outbreak. But again, this way of surviving would inevitably lose its way due to a desire for self-gain and power. However, not every collective in the wasteland was necessarily looking to these old world policies to live, instead embracing a much darker approach to sustain order. You see, within the compound of Terminus, the survivors had been subjected to inhuman torture by plunderers taking advantage of the lawless world. It was once truly a sanctuary created to help the lost, but after fighting back and reclaiming their home, they would become rather sadistic towards outsiders. They, of course, weren't hostile to each other, but when it came to those who were lured in through the broadcasts and signs at railroad crossings, they were given a choice to either join them in their cannibalistic lifestyle or feed them. We even see the rule of law applied to more animalistic groups such as the Whisperers. What the Alpha says goes. If you don't like it, you have the right to challenge the Alpha for the position. It may be primitive, but it's a law nonetheless. Clearly, what's deemed acceptable in a New World society differed between communities as we see come the introduction of the Saviors. Entire organizations have been formed with the sole purpose of serving a tyrant's desires. The Washington, D.C. area was filled with many colorful communities, all with their own ways of functioning in the apocalypse. In the case of Alexandria, the walled-in community was specifically designed to function on its own in the wake of a cataclysmic event, containing solar panels, farms, and a freshwater lake to sustain its people. Despite not having an official democratic election system in place, the people still choose their leader and obey the old world laws enforced by their constables. The Hilltop Colony does run similarly, as they too have a leader, farmers, and guard system, but for the most part functions as a collaborative structure. However, in the case of the kingdom, things are a bit more interesting, as it presents itself as a monarchy with all laws or rules being set by the benevolent King Ezekiel, showing us there really are a variety of old systems that can work in this new world given the right people are in place to enforce them. Each of these communities had similar philosophies of wanting to rebuild a better future, but shared a common enemy in the saviors who heavily oppressed their progress. You see, in their leader Negan's eyes, he was the only one who could rebuild the world through his system of leadership. But this was all a farce to feed his ego, whether he even knew it or not. He would order his saviors to take half of each community's supplies by force in what they would refer to as monthly offerings, which more often than not ended in the death of a civilian as a way to maintain fear and control, all under the guise of providing protection from the dead as a service which all around was bullshit and everyone knew it. So following a war between the newly formed coalition of communities and the saviors, Negan's tyrannical reign would come to an end as Rick would arrest and jail him for his crimes to show the others the time of lawlessness was over, and the era of rebuilding was about to begin, which it absolutely did. Not just their infrastructure, but their way of running things altogether, as the Hilltop installed an actual democratic election system during the time jump, while Alexandria had created a joint charter between the communities, symbolizing the official rebirth of order within the wasteland. However, as we'd come to learn entering the next phase of the universe, the world wasn't as plagued in anarchy as we once believed. You see, come The Walking Dead Season 11, World Beyond, and The Ones Who Live, we learn of various super colonies that had fully maintained and protected an old world law system for over 10 years into the outbreak, inhabiting entire cities while housing a population of nearly 500,000. The colonies of Portland, Omaha, and the Civic Republic of Philadelphia functioned as a coalition dubbed the Alliance of Three, which for a time shared resources and general philosophies of survival, while the Commonwealth, a city of nearly 50,000, remained independent from the Alliance, but strong in their own right, utilizing a class system directly inspired by the old world to both lift up and oppress its citizens depending on their pre-apocalypse career. The revelations of a larger world existing out there came as quite the shock, given we were led to believe our survivors had something special and unique forming. But while the Lost were facing anarchy on the most extreme scale, an entire society was kicking back and enjoying life just as they remembered from before. Although, despite being a union, the Civic Republic in particular was always rather secretive about their operations, and wouldn't even reveal their location to their own allies. This was a result of their military becoming increasingly wary of the Alliance's stability, which by 2020 led to the CRM launching a gas attack on Omaha, killing nearly 100,000 people in order to prevent a future strain on resources, telling us even though they pretend to be the restorers of civility, order, and law, they're really no better than the plunderers out there in the wild. They act as the judge, jury, and executioner for entire civilizations that could have just been left to their own devices, which is ironic given the city only stood today as a result of the Pennsylvania National Guard refusing to let Philadelphia fall to the US Air Force during Operation Cobalt. The cities may have governed themselves democratically from within, but it was the reformed Civic Republic military that was truly in charge. This genocide wasn't to end with Omaha either, as Portland was set to receive the same fate, but after a complete massacre of the CRM's entire malevolent sector by Rick and Michonne Grimes' hands, Portland was left standing, and the Civic Republic as a whole was reformed into an organization dedicated to helping communities across America. Which brings us to the modern day. With the Commonwealth remaining an independent super colony in spite of the Civic Republic's influence, I believe we've begun to see the seeds plant for the formation of a new United States. As discussed in my Return of Power video, it seems by Dead City's timeline, more and more relatively civilized coalitions and societies are beginning to spring up across the country. But much like the states in our world, they each have their own laws that differ and contrast from each other. In the case of the Commonwealth, a full court system has been put into place that gives the accused within their society a chance to plead their case, before facing whatever punishment fits the crime. Or at least, that's how it went after the Commonwealth Revolution, as the system was rigged under Pamela Milton's rule. But over in a smaller coalition such as New Babylon, we see capital punishment is an extremely common practice. And judging by Marshal Pearlie Armstrong's actions, doesn't require a trial to be dealt. But if you follow the rules and contribute to their society, you'll be able to live a relatively happy life outside of walls. Lance Hornsby's dream was to see a reclamation of the eastern United States, complete with universities, vacation homes, and whatever else comes with a healthy society, which I think we will see happen similarly to the ending of the comics, but not solely as a result of the Commonwealth. Or any single faction for that matter. As we see in Season 11, annexation without casualties isn't really an option when you're up against organized coalitions of apocalypse-hardened survivors. So the only way to progress past this cycle of violence is to work together, but remain independent as to let the unique cultures and ideas of others thrive. The rebuilding of the United States is coming. New world power sources have been discovered, and the areas where anarchy once reigned have begun to thin. At this point in the timeline, conflicts can result in the deaths of thousands rather than dozens. Even if some influential factions such as the Baratzi don't want to give away their resources, I can't imagine they'd want to step to a force such as the Commonwealth or Civic Republic. So I believe this desire to develop and rebuild would inspire even the worst of those out there to want a trade system over a resource war. Regardless, it's clear the days of taking or doing whatever you want without consequences are slowly coming to an end. The country is more connected now than it's been in nearly 20 years through the production of corn fuel-powered vehicles and aircraft, or the establishment of railways by the Commonwealth. So your actions within the anarchy can easily carry throughout the country and affect your life going forward as the world rebuilds. The return of law on a large scale has shown even the most ruthless dictators such as Negan actions have consequences. Surviving without order is no way to live at all. So if society is to repair itself going into the next phase of the franchise, I believe the only way forward is to accept all these different ways of life for what they are and unify under the American flag once again. But what do you guys think? Is America slowly beginning the process of rebuilding itself through law and order? Or do you think humanity will backpedal and go to war for what's left over once again? With Negan at the head of the power restoration movement in Manhattan, it's hard to say which direction the future will take. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. But that's gonna do it for me today, folks. As always, thank you so much for watching.